Well, hello, Bio 20. Welcome to our very first video on photosynthesis, and we're going to do an introduction on pigments. So to start, we're going to talk about the outcome. Students will explain how photosynthesis relates to everyday life, I guess. Our learning objective is to understand light waves have different pigments. These pigments are absorbed or reflected from plants using chloroplast. Energy absorbed is used to drive oxidizing and reducing processes. How do I know that you've understood the lesson? Is you can identify the different pigments by name, such as chlorophyll, xanthophyll, and carotenes. You can identify different pigments using chromatography paper, as well as you can make an RF value to understand how far they traveled up chromatography paper. So we're going to start today talking about what is photosynthesis. We're going to break the word down into two. Photo means light, so like sunshine, or a photon is a little piece of light, right? So photo means light. Synthesis means to build. So anytime you see the word synthesis, it means to make or to build. So this is the process that plants use, or other photosynthetic organisms such as algae or something like that. They use this to trap the sun's energy and then change it into what we would call a chemical rich compound. For us, we're going to talk about it changes it into glucose. So photosynthesis, what is the purpose of it? The purpose is to create a high energy molecule of glucose. Glucose is a sugar that our body uses to undergo the process of cellular respiration, and we're going to get into that on a whole other video, but that is the purpose of photosynthesis. The result of photosynthesis is to create glucose, okay? So the purpose is to create high energy molecules of glucose. The result is glucose. Now, I'm going to expect you to understand all the other parts that come with it, but for now, just the simplest form, photosynthesis is about making glucose. What we're going to do now is you're going to sketch in your note a chloroplast. So to fill in some of the information, in almost all producers, so that's plants, all right, photosynthesis occurs inside the cellular organelle called the chloroplast. You need to know that. That is really, really important. Okay, so the chloroplast is now going to drive all of our conversations around photosynthesis. So this is what you are drawing and labeling. So what you see here is the green chloroplast, okay, and it's where the light is trapped and where photosynthesis occurs. So you have an outer membrane and an inner membrane. Now, what you need to understand is there's also an intermembrane space, and then this yellow stuff here is called the stroma. Please make sure for sure you've labeled the stroma, as the stroma becomes very important in the process of photosynthesis that you need to memorize. And we'll get there, but I just need to make sure that you have this all labeled. We also then have the key pieces of the chloroplast. Oops, sorry, I moved my mouse too close. So you have inside, so these little green stacks, okay, you can see the ones over here circled. The whole stack is called a grana or a granum. One of these little tiny green things is called a thylakoid. The stuff that holds it together are called lamella, and inside the thylakoid is called the lumen, or inside the thylakoid. So the lumen and the stroma for sure need to be labeled, as well as the thylakoid, because we're going to talk a lot about those as we talk about the process of photosynthesis. So please make sure you sketch this, label it all, and so you have a good sketch of what a chloroplast looks like. So if we're looking at photosynthesis as an equation, we're going to break it down chemically. We're talking about reactants and products. So what goes in and what comes out. So on the one side, all the reactants that go in are carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight. You may write it down as carbon dioxide, water, and energy, but essentially sunlight because we're talking about plants. What we get out of photosynthesis is glucose and oxygen. So when we talk about the process of photosynthesis, we are looking for where do the reactants go in and where do the products come out. This is the balanced chemical equation that you should write in your notes. Understanding this equation and memorizing this equation will actually help you a lot as you go through the process, because you'll be able to check where everything is as we go through both the light dependent and the light independent reactions. So we're going to define the following things. The grana is called the stack of thylakoids. So if you look back at the picture you drew, you probably circled a stack of them. That's the grana or the granum. It has two names. It's okay if you refer to it in either or. The thylakoid is the flattened sac or the green sac that you saw in the picture or whatever you drew. This is where chlorophyll is, and this is a pigment that we're going to talk a lot about. The stroma, which I also asked you to make sure you labeled, is the fluid in the inner space. Now, the reason this is important is it contains proteins and other chemicals that are helping drive the making of carbohydrates. And there's processes that occur in the stroma. So we need to know where it is and what it does. So that's kind of the very nitty-gritty beginnings of photosynthesis, just the general information. Now I want to talk about pigments. So pigments are found in plants. One of the most important pigments in plants is called chlorophyll. It's a green pigment. It's actually what causes plants to look green. So if you're looking at a plant and it's got green leaves, it's because of the chlorophyll. Now, the thing about chlorophyll that's super cool is chlorophyll as a pigment absorbs red and blue wavelengths of light. So if we look over here on my little diagram here, you can see blue, okay, right here, chlorophyll A, okay, and you can see chlorophyll B. Now, chlorophyll A and B, well, I should say chlorophyll A, okay, they absorb red and blue wavelengths. So if you see here, here's the violet red, okay, and then over here as well, that's chlorophyll B over here. Okay, the reason that this is super important is because they absorb red and blue very well, chlorophyll does, A and B, but it reflects green light. So what does that mean is, because plants are green, it's because of the reflection of the green wavelengths from the light. So the plant collects the wavelengths, reds, blues, oranges, yellows. It collects all of those wavelengths, but it reflects green. And that is why we see green from a plant. So it's really important that plants have a lot of variety of pigments so that we can utilize lots of wavelengths of light. We don't want just red and blue. We want red, we want blue, we want yellow, we want orange. We want all those different wavelengths of light because the start of light, so introducing light into the process of photosynthesis is one of the ways that photosynthesis is driven. Remember, it's carbon dioxide plus water plus sunlight. So we need sunlight. And if we only used a little bit of the sunlight, that would be completely pointless. We want to use a large amount of the sunlight that hits the plant. So we have lots and lots of wavelengths that are absorbed by different pigments. So you have the chlorophyll A and B, which are your reds and your reds and blues. So again, here's your blue light. You got chlorophyll A here and chlorophyll B here. Okay, so there's your blue light. And then over here, you have chlorophyll B and A over here on the red end. So they absorb your reds and blues. If you look at here, phycoerythrin, phyocyanin, and beta carotenes, those absorb other ones, such as your violets, your yellows, your oranges. Those ones will all get absorbed. You'll notice that there is a drastic drop right in the center, right here at green, with all of them. None of them are absorbing green wavelengths, okay? And that is again because we reflect those wavelengths. So if you're looking at this picture, it kind of again shows exactly what I was just talking about in general, more general terms. Here's chlorophyll A, B, and beta carotenes. You'll notice that they absorb all the blue spectrums and then start to die off in the green, a little bit in the yellow, and then more in the orange and red, okay? So again, I reflect green, I see green, I don't absorb green. The interesting thing is if you ever think about fall, so think to like what is happening right now, we're kind of entering into the season of fall. Fall, our leaves turn from green into yellows, oranges, and reds. And that's because as the gets cooler out and as the sun is not as strong, the chlorophyll pigment can't absorb as efficiently as it used to, so it doesn't do its job as good. So you're no longer reflecting green light and you're no longer seeing green. You start to see the other colors come through as the sunlight hits them and it absorbs different wavelengths. Okay, so with the green pigment no longer present, now we're going to see the reds and the yellows that the leaves would normally absorb. Now are reflecting, and eventually they're just going to turn brown because there's not enough sunlight. All right. So what we're going to do is we are going to do a lab on chromatography, which just kind of shows us how stuff can separate out pigments. There's going to be two types. We're going to do an ink chromatography, and then we're going to do a spinach chromatography.